So hopefully I've made it just in time. And maybe people will start joining soon. I'm just going to move this table back a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Just had a few technical issues there when I was trying to launch the video, so hopefully nothing went too crazily wrong. Oh, we've got some people coming and joining. Hello, hello if you're just joining us now. Welcome to the Ella Blouse Sewalong. Hi everyone. If you're just joining, do introduce yourself in the chat, do say hello. I've got Rosie on board with me today. She's here on the chat. Hello Rianne, hello. Helen, hello. Monique, hi from Cape Town. Hi. Yeah, do join in guys on the chat, say hello, say where you are. I know everyone always likes to know where everyone's from Wales, hello there. And I always like seeing, oh, from Luxembourg. Hi. Cool, so I'll just wait a little bit for everyone to join. Oh, well, thank you, Rosie. I am wearing, it's actually a Meredith top. So we've got a Meredith dress pattern. And this is a top I made ages ago, and actually I haven't worn it for a while. I just hacked it into the top. I'll stand up so you can see. So I just cut it up cut it off at the hip length. So it just works as a nice little top. So an easy little hack if you've got the Meredith pattern already and you wanted to make it, then you could just make it into a little top, and then you could make it, you know, if you haven't got enough fabric or something, that's something you can do. So hi everyone, thank you for joining. America, so yeah, exactly. We've got a good mix here, haven't we, L'Oreal? I can see your chat's a bit easier today. It was disappearing the other day, so hopefully that'll stay up. So I'll just wait a little bit more before starting, but just to let you know, what am I doing today? We're doing the Ella Blouse today, and I'm going to do something a little bit different because it's normally we recommend it to be sewn in a woven fabric. I'm actually going to use a jersey fabric. I know some customers have made it before in a jersey, and that works really well, so I thought I'd show you how to do that. And there's not much I'm going to change about it, but there's just a few little things that little tips that I'm going to give you along the way. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm filming from home today, so hopefully I won't have any scaffold noise in the background. Earlier some tree surgeons turned up outside, which was lovely timing, but I think they've gone now. Though I have got my little boy at home today because he's not very well, so if you hear any crying in the background, it's probably my husband. He's on baby duty. So, but hopefully he'll just be going down for a nap now. So anyway, it should be nice and quiet in the background. You can all hear me a bit better, but if you can't, let me know and I'll speak up. Oh, thank you very much, Kim. Got my tree up, quite pleased with it. It's quite a good shape, isn't it? I've got a few handmade decorations on as well. I'll move a little bit so you can see. There we go. Good bit of Christmassy background for you there. And my husband's massive record collection. Right, so I think we'll crack on with some sewing. So, as I mentioned, I'm making the Ella Blouse, and I'm making it in one of our fabrics. This is one of our viscose jerseys, so it's quite a lightweight jersey. And this is the wine colour. There's a link down below, and Rosie can pop that in as well if you want to make the same one. So yeah, I'm using a viscose jersey because it's quite light and drapey, but you can actually make the Ella Blouse in loads of different fabrics. So yeah, we recommend something with a bit of drape to it. So a woven viscose works really well, a crepe does, silk if you're feeling a little bit fancy, that would be nice. If you want a little bit of an easier ride, because obviously the drapier fabrics can be a little bit shifty, move around a bit, then you could use a cotton lawn as well. That works really nicely. I think Lisa's made some in cotton lawns as well that you could see on the product page, if I'm right there. Yeah, so there's a few different options for you. You could also make it, if you're going to go down the jersey route, you could use a cotton jersey as well. That should be nice and stable, so a little bit easier to work with. The viscose jersey, again, it's got that drapey, slinky quality, so it is a little bit more shifty. So it's not got many pieces, the pattern, which is good. So that's quite simple. We've got the front bodice piece, which is a little bit funky looking. So here's one piece here. Don't know if you can see all of that. It's still got the fold marks on where it's been rolled on the board. That's what those are. Obviously that would come out in the wash, but we haven't pre-washed it. We have just cut it straight off the board. So it's a little bit of a funky shape if you look at the pattern piece. Yeah, but we're going to do some folding and put some darts in, and that will make it look a little bit more normal. The sleeve is a grown-on sleeve, so there's no sleeve to insert, so that makes it quite nice and simple too. So it's a fairly easy pattern to construct. You just need to take into account a few things as you go along, which I'll explain to you. So what we're going to do first is overlock a few edges. So we've got this front edge, so it's a wrap blouse. I should explain that. If you've not seen the pattern, you don't know. It's a wrap blouse. And we are going to overlock this front edge here, and then that's going to be folded in to create a grown-on facing on the inside. So I was having a chat to our wonderful Nicole, our pattern production manager, about this, and she suggested if you're going to overlock this edge, then overlocking like a single layer of viscose jersey, you know, it can get a little bit, well, it can sort of go a bit haywire sometimes. So to reinforce it, she recommended using some seam tape along there. So we've got the Vilene seam tape, which has got a little bit of give in it. So I haven't got any at home here, so I've just used a strip of fusible interfacing, some knit interfacing. So it has got a little bit of give, but it just supports that edge there. So I've put that all the way along the front edge, and I've also put it on the bottom of the blouse piece as well. So that's on the bottom of the bodice piece, because actually the bottom, that'll be the bottom in the end, is cut on the bias. So it could stretch out a little bit more. It's a little bit liable to stretching that edge there. So I've just interfaced that as well. Just sewn, ironed on just a centimetre strip of interfacing onto there. But if you've got some of the seam tape stuff, that works wonders as well. So, oh, hello everyone. Hello, thank you for joining and introduce yourself. Do let us know where you're from in the world when you join. It's always nice to see who's there. Who's sewing? Is anyone actually sewing live with us today, sewing at Ella Blouse, or are you just joining for a little bit of lunchtime, a little lunchtime downtime? Though actually, for all of you, it's not lunchtime for everyone, is it? I imagine those in the US, Cape Town. What time is it in Cape Town? I have no idea. Maybe you could tell us, whoever it was who's in Cape Town. Denmark. I think you're probably just an hour ahead. Is that right? Right, anyway, so I've got my overlocker here. I didn't have matching threads for my overlocker, so I've used a little combo of red and black, but it's going to be on the inside anyway, so none of those stitches are going to be visible on the outside if you pull at the seams or anything. So I could have gone wild rainbow, it wouldn't really matter. But yeah, so I'm just going to overlock this front edge. It's 2 p.m. Oh, Lorianne. Just gone 5 a.m. in Oregon. That is commitment to the cause. You must love sewing. Right, so I'm just going to overlock that front edge. I'm not cutting anything off here, it's just to finish that edge. And as it's jersey, actually, you don't have to finish that edge, but it just helps keep it nice and neat. So I'm going to... So that's one side done, and then the other. Where are we? There we go. So the next step in the instructions is actually to sew the darts in, but while I've got the overlocker up here, I'm just going to overlock a few other bits as well, just while it's there. So the back neck facing, this is the back neck facing, tiny little piece, you just overlock the bottom of that later on in the instructions. I'm just going to do it now. Often when I'm sewing, I try and do a few jobs at the same time that are similar. So for instance, I might sew all the darts in one go, because then you can press them all in one go as well. So always have a little read through the pattern first and see, you know, if there's things you can do in advance. My overlocker's not enjoying going around that curve there. Again, thankfully that's going to be on the inside. We got anyone joining for the first time? Was that someone saying they were joining for the first time? Maybe. Right, so I've done that. Yes, lovely. So I'm just going to pop my overlocker down and bring my sewing machine forward. Because even though I'm sewing this in jersey, I am actually going to sew most of it on my regular sewing machine. Because of course you don't have to have an overlocker. Oh, Mum and Dad are watching. Hi Mum and Dad. Big fans. Thank you for watching. Yeah, so you don't, if you're sewing jersey fabrics, knit fabrics, you don't have to have an overlocker at all. And even for finishing those edges, if you don't have an overlocker, you could just use a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. You could use your pinking shears or something like that. So yeah, there's lots of options. You don't have to shell out for an overlocker if you don't want to, or you know, yeah. So I'm going to sew most of it on the sewing machine. I will just use, sorry, I'm looking at the chat at the same time. I am going to use a stretch stitch on my sewing machine for most of the seams. So my machine doesn't have a specific fancy pants stretch stitch. So some of your machines might have a lightning stitch on them. Mine doesn't have one of those, so I'm just going to use a narrow zigzag stitch. So I'll probably make mine about almost 2mm wide, between 1.5 to 2mm wide, and sort of similar in length really. Do some tests on your fabric first before you start sewing your you know, your precious fabric. I just use the scraps that are left over from cutting out the pattern, and then just test the machine with those first before I do any sewing. So I've already tested and I think we're good to go. So the first things we're going to do is sew the darts. So I don't know if you can actually really, where is it? See the darts very well, but we've got a bust dart on the Ella Blouse. So just going to pin that into position. So even though I just said I'm going to use a stretch stitch to sew most of the blouse, because I'm using a jersey, a stretch fabric, for the dart I'm actually just going to use a straight stitch. You could use a very narrow lightning stitch here, but because of where the darts are, they're not going to need to stretch very much. So a regular stretch stitch, that's actually really difficult to say, will be fine there. So I'm just going to pin both of these in before I sew them. Where's the other one? You've got little notches at the end of your darts here, so you can line those up. I've just used a little chalk pen to draw these on. You could use tailor's tacks if you wanted. I know some people like to thread trace their darts on. I'm also using, if you can see this funky foot on my machine, I've got my walking foot on my machine, mainly because it costs a fortune, so I use it as often as possible. But also because it helps to stop the fabric from stretching out as you sew. So if you use a normal presser foot, it can put additional pressure on the fabric as you sew and stretch it out. Whereas the walking foot is like having feed dogs on top of the fabric. So it pulls the fabric through nice and evenly as you sew and helps to stop it from stretching. Sometimes my machine doesn't like the walking foot on stretch fabrics. start skipping stitches. But I did a test and it was all right. I think we're friends. So I am going to use, as I said, a straight stitch here. So that's the first dart. Let's go into the tip here. Now, normally what I do for darts, I think is a little bit unconventional, but I saw it on someone else's vlog years ago, and I thought, that's a really good idea. So what I do when I get to the end of the dart, I leave the needle. Unfortunately, I can't do you a close-up so you can see, but I leave the needle right on the edge of the fabric, and then you have to be quite, what was I going to say? Quite specific when you do this. I swivel the fabric round, and then I sew back along the dart, but so I'm not sewing over my original stitching, I'm sewing right along the fold of the fabric, just a little bit. So this is something I would definitely say practice. I have actually filmed a video on this on Stitch School, if you're on Stitch School. If you're like, I don't know what she's doing, this doesn't make any sense. But I basically sew back into the dart to finish that off. Of course, if you've not done that before, that seems a little bit of a crazy thing to do, then finish your dart the normal way. You know, you can just leave your long threads there and just tie it off on the end, but don't backstitch when you get to the end. That will end in disaster, trust me. So I've done one dart there. And I will do another one. So my thread cut has gone a bit haywire. So is anyone doing any sewing for Christmas? Is anyone making any gifts or anything like that? You might have seen Lisa's tie Sewalong yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yes, yesterday. Which she did in half an hour. So that is a quick gift you can make there. I also saw one of our customers had made one of our new Poppy and Jazz patterns, the walnut duffel coat, and she emailed us in a beautiful coat that she'd made for her granddaughter. It was so, I mean, I wanted it, it was so nice. So that's a bit more involved. You're making a Minnie Mouse, oh that's so cute, someone's making makeup bags, Minnie Mouse bathrobe for their daughter. Nice. Something like a bathrobe's good to make. Is that Rosie? You're teaching your boyfriend how to make drawstring bags so he can make them for presents. That's a good idea. But yeah, something like a bathrobe is really good to make because obviously it doesn't really matter, the fit isn't so precise on it. So if it's a little bit big, then you know they can just wrap it a little bit tighter. That's a really nice present to make. So those darts are done. Again, I finished them in my slightly weird way there. At the same time, actually next in the instructions, it's press the darts. But, is that someone? What I'm going to do is sew the back darts as well, because then I can press them all at the same time. So in the back, we've got two vertical darts going down the back. They're quite narrow little darts actually. I am going to do some secret sewing. I have to say it a bit quieter so that my husband doesn't hear. Might be a bit of secret sewing going on before Christmas. But as you know, if you live with someone, it can be a bit difficult to try and sew for them without them knowing. You've got to try and hide yourself away or do it when they're not there. But I've ordered some fabric and it hasn't come yet, so I'm a little bit stressed about that. I think it was coming from Germany, which I didn't realise when I placed the order. I'm going to pin both of these darts in at the same time. And I know people have different preference for pinning their darts. I like to pin so the pins go like that off the edge of the dart. Because then I can get right up to them as I'm sewing and then just pull them out on the side. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to sew those into position. So again, I'm just using my straight stitch here. So like 2.5 millimeters long. Someone's checking in on your lunch break. Oh, hi there, is it Noella? Yes. Is that how you pronounce it? It's a Meredith top. So our Meredith wrap dress made into a top, which I rediscovered in my wardrobe and I was like, I should make another one of these. Because I spend most of my time in jeans at the moment, so a lot of my dresses, I'm not getting a great deal of work, not getting all that many outings. But it's a nice one for layering over things as well. So I've got a vest underneath because it's a bit colder. Tucked in, Lisa. I know she likes a tucked in top to keep the heat in. Right, so that's one dart done. So I'll tell you what, I'll finish this one in a more standard way. I'm just going to tie off the end of the dart there. So when you do that, make sure you don't pull that knot too tight because you don't want to create any kind of dimple or anything in the fabric. So I'm just tying a little double knot at the end. And then I'll do the other dart. So this blouse is a really nice one for going over the top of like dresses and stuff like that. And it sits at your natural waist as well, so it's got ties on and that'll sit on the waist. Why can't you backstitch? Someone's saying, I think, at the end. It's just, I mean, it can end badly because basically you've got so close to the edge of the fabric that if you try and backstitch there, you can sort of end up pulling the end of the dart. It can just get very messy. So it's really best not to backstitch at the end of the dart. You know how sometimes when you're sewing and if you start on the edge of your fabric, then your machine sometimes just randomly eats the fabric. Does that make sense? Tammy, is it? Yes. So, I mean, obviously, if it works for you and you don't have any problems with backstitching there, then there's more than one way to do things with sewing. But generally, we wouldn't recommend backstitching at the end of the dart. So I've sewn in my 4 darts now. So I'm going to press them, and I've got here my handy little pressing mat I got from Lidl, which is a supermarket here for those international viewers. So I think in Denmark, do you have Lidl? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But Lidl is a supermarket here that has a mystery aisle in the middle where you can just get all kinds of things. They have like, you know, bike repair stuff or, well, pressing mats or kids' clothes, all kinds of things. So this was a little impulse buy the other week. I'm pretty pleased with. So your bust dart you want to press down And you can always use a pressing ham, if you've got a pressing ham, to press those over to get a nice smooth point on there if you're finding that difficult. Or a rolled up towel if you haven't got a pressing ham. Then that works just fine. So press all your bust darts down, all of them, all 2 of them. And a little bit of steam helps to smooth out at the end of the dart there, so you don't get sort of, you know, you can get a dimple sometimes on the end. And then I'm going to press my back darts as well. So I'm going to press those towards the centre. So usually with vertical darts, then they're pressed towards the centre. So the centre back or centre front. Just going to give just a bit of an iron at the same time. I didn't pre-iron my pattern pieces here. Lovely. Right. Just going to check the instructions so I know what I'm doing next. Back darts, right. So we need to fold the facing back because I've skipped ahead a little bit, so I'm going to skip back. So as I mentioned, the facing is a grown on facing, so which is the front edge. So we're just going to fold over the front edge of, there we go, like that, of the pattern piece to create the facing. So you've got notches on your pattern piece so you know how far to fold it over. You can also measure the facing is marked on the pattern piece, so you can measure the width of those lines as well before you fold over. So I measured it earlier, it was 4.2 millimetres, 4.2 centimetres even, not millimetres. So just fold that back. I'm just going to check it's roughly right. And actually I've completely lost my notch at the top. Don't know where that's gone. So that's why it can be helpful to just measure as well to make sure you're doing it right. So just press that into position. We're not going to sew this into position yet because we're going to need to move it around later. So just pin that into position at the top and the bottom. So you can always pin it in the middle as well, just to help keep it where it is. That's pressed really nicely actually. Sometimes I find with viscose that it can go a little bit shiny when you press it, so just be a bit careful with your iron and do a test first. I have actually got a pressing cloth too that I'm using, and if I press it from the right side I might use that as well, just to make sure there's no shininess on it. I did once read that to get rid of that shininess you can use vinegar. I don't know if anyone's tried that. But is a Meredith... Well, interesting question. Someone was asking there if is the Meredith like a Jersey Eve? And basically, yeah, so we've got little gathers. I don't know if you can see here. There's little gathers, just like the Eve dress as well. Because we used to get a lot of people asking, oh, could I make the Eve dress in Jersey? A little bit tricky. So yeah, we basically made a Jersey version. And it's a really nice, simple thing to wear that just looks good on loads of people, like the Eve dress as well does actually. So pressing back that front facing. Again, just pin that into position. I don't know if we've done a Rosie, do you know if we've done a sew along for Meredith? That's a little test for you, sorry. Can she remember? It is a dreamy combination, yeah. Go and have a look at the Meredith dress, it's very nice. And it comes as a tissue printed pattern as well. We just said, I don't think we have. Maybe we'll have to get it on the cards. We could do a top version. Okay, what am I doing next? So I've pressed those facing bits back. Lovely. So that's going to give it a really clean finish on the front edge. If you had particularly like bouncy fabric, I guess you could top stitch that, but you know, you wouldn't get that kind of clean finish to it. So we're not going to do that. Next thing to do is to sew the shoulder seams. Yes, it is. I'm just checking my instructions. So let me just make sure I've got the right side. Okay, so right sides together. Line up your bodice pieces. So I've got one of the, obviously we've got two front pieces and we've just got the one back piece because the back piece is cut on the fold. So line that up with, you know how fabric sometimes sticks to itself and then it's a bit difficult to move around. Yes, a printed version. Rosie, you can put a link to the Meredith. I know we're sewing the Ella, but you know. Obviously, you know, all our PDF patterns as well you can get printed because they come with A0 patterns, pattern sheets. So if you don't fancy printing off at home and sticking loads of pieces of paper together, there's always the copy shop, which we can print and send to you. So you've got notches on your shoulder seam as well. There's a couple of notches so that you can get it all lined up. So just pin all the way along there. And when you get to the neckline, I'll try and show you in a second, but your folded edge, that folded edge is going to sit 1.5 centimetres away from the very edge of the neckline. So I'll show you that in a moment. So yeah, I've pinned down the shoulder seam. So there's the neckline there. You can see right at the neckline edge that folded edge is sitting 1.5 centimetres away there. And that's because we're going to sew the back neck facing on later on. And we need that seam allowance there, basically. So it will be a bit short. Don't panic. It's meant to be like that. Okay, so now because I'm going to sew a seam that might need to stretch a little bit, I'm going to put a slight zigzag on my machine. Obviously, if you're making the Ella Blouse in a woven fabric, so a non-stretch fabric, you wouldn't need to use a zigzag stitch here, you just use a straight stitch. So the seam allowance is 1.5 centimetres throughout the pattern, which is pretty standard for most of our patterns, and if ever it's different, then we would tell you in the instructions. So I'm going to use a slight stretch stitch here, so again about 1.5 millimetres width. I can see some nice comments, thank you guys. And it's about 2 millimetres in length, but if you've got a lightning stitch on your machine, then you can use that as well because that's designed for stretch. And I'm not going to sew this on my overlocker because I need that seam allowance at the top for a bit later on. But I will overlock it later on in my instructions. The thing we're doing a little zigzag is it does take a long time. Because obviously your machine's got to do lots of tiny little stitches. Mine does go pretty fast, but it feels slow. So I saw someone saying there that they like the new pattern. For those in the PDF club, we've got a new pattern out today. So you should have all received the email about that. Obviously, email us if you didn't. Sometimes they can get, because their newsletter, it has to come as a newsletter, sometimes they can get caught in the old spam filters. So, done one shoulder seam. And make sure you backstitch when you get to the end, obviously. And just gonna do the other one. What time are we on? So again, right sides together. Line up your notches. Curling in slightly. Ah, you like the new pattern, Lorianne? Nice, good. It's really quick to sew, actually. In fact, yes, I can say that. I thought I was going to give the game away about what the pattern was. Whew. But anyway, we will be sewing, because it goes on general release next week. So we are going to be doing a sew along for it then. That's what the surprise sew along. But my hint for you is that it's quick to sew. So yeah, that's next Wednesday. Sew along for that. I'm doing that one. Because Lisa's got her week off next week, which I think she definitely deserves. But yeah, we figured at this time of year, people probably don't have loads of time to do lots of sewing, because they're probably doing things like, well, a lot of sewers I know make things for other people. So something that's quick to make is pretty good. So I'm faffing around a bit here, getting these layers to line together. The jersey wanted to curl back on itself. Okay, so I've got my second one pinned in there. Remember that fold of the facing will be 1.5 centimetres away from the neckline edge. You can always double check that. Yep, lovely. With your ruler as well, to be extra precise. So then just sew all the way down that shoulder seam. So again, when I pin things, I like to pin with my pins perpendicular to the seam line. I know not people like to do this in different ways, so that I like to do it that way so I can sew right up to them and take them out without, hopefully, accidentally sewing over them. But I know Julie, our wonderful pattern cutter teacher extraordinaire, she told me she always likes to pin along the seam line, so the pins are like, yeah, parallel to the edge, just going all the way along, so that then she turns everything to the right side just to double check before she sews to make sure it's completely right. So that's a good tip if you're trying to line up some stripes or something like that. can just double check positioning. Just whatever works for you, isn't it, really? Right, so I've done that one. Next, remember Julie once saw me pinning something and was like, oh, why are you doing it that way? But each their own. I just find that's more precise for me because then I can get right up to it before I pull the pin out. Whereas she likes to double check where she is. Wow, someone's mum hand bastes before she sews. I mean, if you're doing something really special, then that's a really good tip. Just to make sure that you've got it all right beforehand. But I mean, it does take a long time. So I don't generally hand baste, but maybe you just really enjoy, maybe she enjoys hand sewing. Just finds that really soothing. Anyone else hand baste before they sew things? By the way, what I'm doing here, someone's mum did the same. Sorry, sometimes I can't read your names because it's quite small text on the screen. So apologies if I don't quite see your name. Not on every seam, no. I couldn't do it personally. It would take me forever to finish anything. But yeah, some people really hate sewing. Someone's saying that they find it really relaxing. Some people really hate hand sewing. I quite like it. I often finish hems by hand because then it's kind of a nice thing that you can do at the end of your project. You can just sit on the sofa, watch some telly, and you know, sew your hem by hand. Gives you a really nice clean finish on the end. Did I tell you what I was doing? I don't think I did. Right, so I'm pinning now the underarm seam. So I've got the dart in there, so just make sure that is pressed down as you pin it. Just realise it says in the instructions to start at the seam, at the hem of the sleeve. So the other reason I pin this way, like that, is because if I realise I want to sew from the other end, I can just flip over the fabric and I can still pull the pins out as I'm sewing, because I can still see the heads to pull them out. So I will follow the instructions and I will sew from the edge of the sleeve. So again, I'm still using my Kim. I think it's something I discovered more by accident, if you're saying that about the pinning. But you know, I'll take it as a tip. So you might just need to stop with your needle down and just rotate your fabric a little bit when you get to that underarm curve. So when you rotate like that, always make sure obviously that your needle is down before you lift the foot up. So I've just realised why we might say to sew from the sleeve hem down. It's because it keeps the dart pressed down as you sew over it, so it's not accidentally, you know, sometimes it can shift underneath sneakily. But it keeps it pressed down. So that's done. The next thing, obviously I would do the next sleeve first, but while I'm here on this sleeve, I'm just going to do the next step, which is to reinforce that underarm. So underarms can get a bit of strain, obviously there's a lot of movement going on there. So if you're sewing a set-in sleeve, then you might add another line of stitching just underneath that underarm. So we're going to do the same here, and just sew sort of about 10 centimetres, so 5 centimetres either side of that underarm curve. just so over your original stitches. So then if one of your stitches pops, hopefully the other line of stitching will be there to back you up. So I'm not measuring here because it's just roughly, so roughly 5 centimetres inside. Okay, just like that. I'm not a very tidy sewer, by the way, but I have got one tip for you, just to have a little thing to catch your threads in when you're cutting off all your loose ends of thread. So what I used to do was just throw them all on the floor as I chopped them off. But I'm trying to be a bit neater, so I catch them in a little pot. And then what I'm doing is I'm keeping all my offcuts of fabric, all my little threads and stuff, and I'm going to make a pouf, is that how you pronounce it? You know, a floor cushion, and stuff it with all my threads and fabric offcuts. Because some of those tiny scraps, it can be really difficult to know what to do with. If you've got something a bit bigger, then you know you could make a drawstring bag or something with your leftovers. But if you've just got little scraps, then what do you do with them? So that's my plan anyway. An ice cream tub for all your threads. Yeah, this gets full pretty quickly. It's just a little ramekin from a famous dessert company that we have here in the UK. So I'm just pinning the other underarm now. Okay, done. Again, I've pinned it on the wrong side, but no worries, I can just flip it over. So from... Oh, and also sometimes when you flip it over, you can see where you have maybe not pinned very accurately. Those raw edges, nowhere near each other. Nowhere near each other. And that was at the underarm as well, so I don't want to end up with a little hole there. So is anyone joining on their lunch break and they've got to head back to work soon? Someone just having a little breather. I guess Lorianne, being so early where you are, that it's breakfast time soon. Or maybe you're going to go back to sleep. You're about to go back to work. Been working while watching, multitasking. Yeah, a lot of people I think are working from home. I guess you can have a bit of YouTube on in the background. Some people have the radio on in the background, don't they? For me, I find that very hard to focus. I can't like switch out one of them. I basically work in silence a lot of the time. But I know some people like that. Oh, I just hit a pin. Whoops, wasn't concentrating. I know some people like the little chatter of radio. You stay up, Lorianne, you're not going back to bed. You must be an early bird. I am not an early bird. I think 7 is early to get up personally. 7:30 even. Even is a bit early. Though getting up early, you do get the sunrise. Careful, yes, no, thank you. Once I knocked out the timing on my whole machine just by hitting a pin. So, it's not advisable. But it's always my fear that I'm going to sew through my finger. Has anyone ever done that? One of my friends told me she didn't want to start sewing because she was terrified that she was going to sew through her finger. I mean, it'd be good drama, wouldn't it? A live sew-along. But thankfully it's never happened. I think it would probably be pretty painful. So I'm just reinforcing the underarm again. So just that sort of tense. Lisa did. I missed that one. Did she do it on a live sew-along? Someone did it while sewing in an invisible zip. Yes, that's when it's a bit hairy. If you do sew an invisible zip in without an invisible zip foot and you're trying to fold open those coils and get really close to them. Ooh. She did it live. Wow. I'll have to ask her about that. So, where am I? I've sewn now. Now it's looking a little bit more like a top. I don't know if you can see. There we go. Got my front on there. What time is it? I've got a little bit more time. So, here the neck facing. Okay, so the next bit to do is to attach the neck facing. So you've got your tiny little neck facing bit here. I'm just going to give it a bit of a press actually, because that curve didn't really like being overlocked earlier. Bit of steam though, fixes anything, that's better. So align your neck facing with your neckline edge so it should match up nicely on the back. So here I've got the front of the blouse facing up. I'm going to flip it over in a second so that I can follow the stitch line on the shoulder seam. But for pinning it in place, I'm just going to pin from this side. So if you don't normally pin like me with your pins perpendicular to the seam line, you will need to here because we're going to flip over the fabric and sew it from the other side. So just got that pinned into position like that so you can see those folded edges, and then I'm just going to turn it round to sew it from the other side. And when you turn it over, you'll see your stitch line from earlier. So we're going to stitch along that where the facing is, and then we're going to stitch round the neckline to meet the other line of stitching at the other end, and then we'll just stitch over the seam line again to secure that facing in place. And then I don't know how much more we'll have time for after that. So you're just using that stitch line as a guide here. So you don't need to necessarily mark that you're 1.5 centimetres away from the edge. But when you get off that folded edge, you're just going to leave your needle down, lift your foot up, place it back down. So just pivoting at that corner there, and then just sew along the back neckline. And you've got a few layers of fabric here, and I can sort of feel that they're trying to, they want to fold up underneath, so just try and smooth them out as you go. You don't want to create any puckers. And you're just heading for that stitch line. So you just head towards that. I've overshot a little bit. Again, leave your needle down, pivot, and then we're just going to sew over that shoulder seam line again. Obviously not all the way down the shoulder seam, just so we've got the edge of the facing. Back stitch at the end there. There we go, so the facing is in position there. So I might leave it there today. So what I would do next is overlock the edges. So I would overlock the shoulder seams, the underarm seams, and you would overlock along the back neckline as well. And then afterwards you would clip into the neckline. So when you overlock, you can trim the seam allowance down as well, so to make it a bit smaller. Yeah, and then you clip into it. So you're clipping into that curve so that when we flip the facing to the other side, it helps to open up that seam allowance so that it sits flat. Because if you didn't clip into it, that seam allowance is shorter and it'd be trying to ride up and it would be messy. So clip into your curve, and then obviously turn it all the right way, or press your seams towards the back. When you, just after you overlock, press your seams towards the back, and then you would need to, let me just double check my instructions so I can tell you what you'd be doing next. Yeah, so then you'd be sewing your pleats in. So at the bottom of the wrap here, there's 2 pleats, which are there. So just fold those in, tack them into position. So you do that on both sides, so tack them in with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. You then need to sew your ties and attach your ties on before you do your hems. I'm just double checking. No, the hems come before you do your ties. So you do the hems and then you do your ties, attach those on right at the end. So that's the last few steps really, it's just doing those ties. Yeah, another thing to mention that I meant to mention earlier on about the Ella Blouse is that it sits at your natural waist. I know some of our customers maybe wanted to lengthen it slightly. If you do, then just drop us an email. I know Nicole before has put together some instructions on how to do it, because it's a bit of a funky shaped pattern piece and it can be hard to work out exactly where to lengthen it. So if you want to do that, then just drop us a message. But obviously it's designed to sit at your natural waist. So it's good with high-waisted things or to go over a dress or anything like that. So there you go, that's the Ella Blouse. And Lisa will be, I'm sure, talking about the finished one in her makes video when she posts that. But tune in next week when we'll have our next sew along for our new pattern. Almost said the name there. The new pattern that's out to the PDF Club today. And it'll be on general release next Wednesday. But thanks for joining everyone, and hope you enjoy the rest of your days, wherever you are. Yeah, and Rosie's just posted the sew along schedule as well. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.